And when you say about, that phrase, that net worth and network, people seem to think that it's just a matter of numbers, is that stockpile as many damn people in your network as possible. I'm like, look, no, you have to connect with the right people. You have to connect with them for a rational reason. And you have to talk to them. Yeah. Because if you don't create a connection, it's kind of pointless. It's like going out on a night out and, chatting to someone all evening and then not actually knowing their name or having the phone number that you can contact them. Yeah, I was chatting to this person, right, and they were in my industry and it was really interesting and we talked about this, that, the other, and then we left. And that was it. But that's what people do with social media.
Hello and welcome to episode 6 of the Gym Owners Forum podcast, part 1 of 2. And the reason it's a part 1 or 2 today is because of our guest. We covered so much stuff, and it's the reason I'm filming this in different clothes, because we didn't realize there was going to be 2 parts. Our guest today needs no introduction. And if I did start introducing him, then we'd be here for the next 20 minutes because he's just doing a vast amount of stuff at the moment. It's Learney. And I really enjoyed this podcast today. There was so much stuff that we spoke about, ranging from his career, coaching advice, just some really good anecdotal stories, Fitbits, wearables, high performance, circadian rhythms, where the industry is right now, where it's going, things to consider when running a business. All of that good stuff is in these next 2 parts of this podcast. And without further ado, let's take a look. Hello and welcome, Learney, to the Gym Owners Forum podcast. Thank you very much for joining us today. I think this will be a bit of a corker. So to get started, I think if you could just give us a little bit of an intro as to who you are, what you do, and why you do it, I guess.
Okay, I'm Learney. I've been in the health and wellness space, I guess, for around about 30 years. I was a coach for 25 of those years, dealt with an array of clientele across quite a broad spectrum. Finished my career dealing largely with high net worths and elite athletes. During that time, I set up an academy for coaches to further coach education. Saw a big gap as I was going through the industry, and that there wasn't much in the way of further education past the base qualification. So I developed the Advanced Coaching Academy, which was a series of 3 courses: business, nutrition, and coaching, all designed for the, again, level 3 coach to advance and move up to a hypothetical level of maybe 7 or 8. So we developed that. We had about 6,000 students through that. We also do assets for coaching and for coaching businesses, which is a large part of the business now. And then I also have a supplement brand, which is called Human 24. And we designed a range of supplements around what we classify as circadian modulation, but looking at nervous system management largely. So looking at, how people utilize stimulants, how the biology functions throughout the course of the day, and also sleep, and how does that affect sleep. So that was all really stemmed off the back of my experience with clients, was dealing with people who, again, were hugely stressed, struggled with sleep, overutilized stimulants, and had an array of other problems that could be associated back to that issue. So that's what I did.
No, perfect. That was a good summarization, actually. One thing you said there is you said you wanted to get them to a hypothetical level of 7 or 8.
Yeah.
I might be reading into this too literally, but why not? Why can't you maybe get to a level of 10 or beyond that? Or is it just kind of a...
It was, again, a hypothetical level. It was, and what a 10, that marker's constantly moving, Tom, and it's... if you look at the industry, and again, this is this evolution that we look at on a yearly basis, and we look at the evolution of the personal training space, where if you look at a personal trainer, or you look at a health club, or you look at anything that's delivering a service, that service is constantly evolving. So what we regarded as the service of a club, and again, I know we're talking a lot about clubs. If we look at a club back in the day, essentially there was a criteria we look at. It had to be clean, you had to be well equipped, you had to have a reception, you had to, and there was various criteria there around what was expected. Now that expectancy has changed, and the expectancy of what a club should have with respect to amenities, facilities. It's a bit like the hotel industry. I always use the hotel industry as a nice analogy around how we look at gyms, fitness facilities, and ultimately the service we offer as coaches. it's the same sort of thing. You know, you want a concierge level service. If you go to a high-end hotel, there's an expectancy around not just the amenities. You know, all gyms, we would expect to have equipment. We would expect to have a reception area. We would expect to have bathrooms. We would expect them to have a level of cleanliness. And even though they're the base requisites, some facilities fail at those.
Yeah.
And then there's then the next step up. And we move all the way through, you know, what's a basic kind of budget offering. And it's the same in coaching. What's a budget coaching offering? And a budget coaching offering, in my view, is what coaching was 20 years ago, which was you pay an instructor to facilitate you exercising safely and effectively. That was essentially the remit. And that's what the level 3 qualified people to do was. You can get insured. You've got enough base knowledge to be able to take that individual off the street and go, right, I'm going to show you how to exercise effectively to get results. And now that has evolved significantly. So obviously when we developed this was, we developed the coaching academy, 8 years ago now. So obviously that has evolved. So again, we've had to evolve it at the same time. So again, a hypothetical level is kind of, it's endless, right?
Yeah, okay, it's endless. No, good answer, actually. I think, yeah. Brilliant. There's so much stuff in there that we'll touch on later as well. But I think before we do that, typically what we do on the show is do a little bit of a starter game, get you warmed up, and just kind of learn a little bit about your opinion on some of the things in the industry as well. So, Room 101.
Okay.
It's not really a format that works with two people, so we've had to change it a little bit. So
get a lever. I have to put things in it.
Exactly, yeah. And we've got the vault downstairs that only flies into it. So I think the way that we'll do this is I'll give you two topics.
Yeah.
You'll explain to me why they're bad or why they're maybe not so bad.
Okay.
And then I'll decide which goes into Room 101.
Okay.
And I guess the aim is to make them both as bad as each other, but obviously I think you'll find a way to, we'll make one sound worse, I'm sure. So,
okay.
So to start off, we've got vaping.
Okay.
And complaining and non-action. So non-action on issues that people have.
Okay.
I've tried to make them very, very.
And you want me to give my opinion as to why they're both bad?
Yeah, what the negatives are of both of them. Maybe, look, if you really think one of them's good, which I doubt you do, then you can make one sound better if you want, but yeah.
Well, vaping, I mean, what is there that's good? Essentially what, in my view, what they've done is they've taken something that became socially unacceptable, which was, smoking. It smelled bad. It made his clothes smell. It was hugely detrimental to health. And what they've done is to repackage that into something that not only is more appealing, but you've taken away all the negatives. You've managed to keep all of the health negatives. You maintained the fact that this is still inherently incredibly bad for you. But they've also widened their audience scope, which is a bit akin to, when they first brought out Alka-Pops.
Yeah.
Obviously, one of the things, and again, I don't know whether you'll recall this, because again, you were privy to a slightly different environment when it came to alcohol. But, when I was growing up, it was a very refined sort of taste to drink a beer or drink a glass of wine and blah, blah. One of the big things is until you kind of taste buds matured, you weren't really interested. It was like coffee, right?
Yeah.
And now what they've done is they've made all of those things palatable and hyper palatable to some degree to make them accessible, I guess, to younger generations. So I guess from a vaping perspective, that there is nothing there that's positive in my view. There's no positive outcome from it. There's no benefit to it.
Yeah.
Apart from probably, and again, arguably, if we look from a science perspective, it's, the social acceptance, I guess, is there, but that's always driven by an individual or a group or whatever it might be. I guess that's the problem, the argument you could probably make for it, akin to kind of what the argument for alcohol is social facilitation, right?
Yeah,
is that there is a positive side for that somewhere, but again, I don't see where that sits with vaping and particularly with kind of nicotine and blah blah blah. So that's that one. The other one was lack of action.
Non-action on
non-actions. I guess I would argue that isn't anywhere near as bad in many respects, because again, action is driven by the individual. And then obviously we get a series of individuals which creates a collective, and then a collective need to make an action. It's about like making a business decision. You either make it on your own or you make it as a part of a collective. But again, it's like making plans to do something, but then never actually executing it. So it's ultimately the consequence comes back to you as an individual. So without going around in circles about how that sort of figures, I guess it's more of an individual choice that's presented to pretty much everybody. Is you can make a plan, but if you don't execute the plan, it's kind of pointless. So, but I think the detriment towards somebody as an individual is just you're not going to succeed and get to where you want to get to, which is probably far less inherent than damaging your health to the point that you probably drop down dead.
Yeah.
So I think vaping for me would probably be the bigger one. But
I'd have to agree with you actually. I think the non-action on stuff is kind of just like a plateau effect, like nothing changes. It's quite right, which is fine, not fine, but you know what I mean. Whereas the vaping is actually it's funny. I've never really thought of it as you put it really, but it's like the social aspect of it is like no one actually kind of knows that you're doing it if you don't want them to.
Yeah.
And so that it's actually like it's having a negative impact on your health, but also none of the kind of its negative social consequences.
Yeah, probably something there really topical on that, Tom, is the use of snus.
Yeah.
Snus is what they've done is they've taken something that, again, and we get a problem with this in elite sports now, and their estimations around the usage in elite sport are quite good to see, but it's something that's discreet. Nobody knows you're doing it. So there's no social judgment. There's nobody passing judgment. Ultimately, human beings resonate towards things that stimulate them. And, when it comes to artificial stimulants, caffeine, nicotine, people tend to resonate towards them. So I think it is that thing. And like you say, it's something people can kind of discreetly do. You see people sneaking them on planes and all these areas that you're no longer allowed to smoke. So what they've done is they've gone, right, we need to innovate here because nobody's allowed to smoke in these spaces. So we've created something that kind of facilitates that. People can do it sneakily.
Yeah.
But again, it's that horrible viewpoint when you're driving around at 4 o'clock in the afternoon and you see, kids walking out of school vaping, and it was kind of a rare sight, I think, back in the day. And again, I'm old enough to remember where if you saw someone smoking coming out of school, it was like, wow, it was crazy. Whereas now it's normal. You see big groups of kids all with vapes in their hands, and yeah, I think it's crazy, but anyways.
Oh yeah, no, true. I mean, just finally on that, I think with the kids aspect of it, it kind of is like a social status thing. I think maybe, and that's why they.
Smoking probably was. Well, smoking was. It was a social status thing, wasn't it? It was people smoke because it was trendy. Yeah, and then ultimately you're then too far gone, and you continue because it's something that you rely on and you need. So yeah,
no, definitely right. Imaginary leather gone.
So it's vaping going.
Yeah, it's vaping. Yeah.
Excellent. Good.
We'll put them both in there just for argument's sake. And then I think for the next one we should do hopping on every single trend.
Yeah.
And not allocating your resources and trying to do everything yourself. So,
okay.
Yeah. Bandwagon. No, not using your support network around you.
Okay. Are we talking on a business context?
In a business context.
So the bandwagon thing is, the problem you have there is it's look, we're a distracted society, right? Largely, we're a distracted society. We know we have problems focusing. People have problems with concentration more so than ever before. Nervous systems, and again, without getting into what we do and why we do it, but nervous systems are cooked. People are, you look at social media. People scroll and they have to process that information. And now I think that attention. So I think the bandwagon thing is we're primed for it. We're primed for it. People want to differentiate themselves. When it comes to the health and wellness space, it's always been this thing of, coach wants to look different, like their proposition is different. Clubs, same sort of thing. So they'll get the newest piece of fad equipment in because somebody's seen it in a magazine or whatever it might be, but ultimately it doesn't serve the functional purpose we want it to. And I think that's the challenge you have with the bandwagon thing is that, nobody ever sees it through. It's like dietary trends. We see them come and go all the time. I'm old enough to have seen a lot of things go full circle multiple times. So I think the bandwagon thing has again, we're not talking detrimental effects here. We're just talking about, look, you're just going to waste your time because, we're not jumping on things that have any kind of evidence behind them or have any support behind them. Now, there's things where what we've classified them as emerging, where the data looks pretty good. And again, I'm a scientist, by trade. So, I always look at the data and I'm like, look, if the data's emerging, and that, for example, in the supplemental space, we look at ingredients that look really positive right now, but in 5 years, when we've got a bigger body of evidence, they might not be quite as. And this is the same with fads and trends or whatever it might be. So there's that. I guess not massive detriment, right?
Just on that as well, how do you differentiate between that? Is it just kind of looking at the data, or is there a kind of a quicker way, I guess, or a lazier way?
Well, there isn't really. There's you've got supporting evidence for something, and the problem you have is that, look, if something's a new concept, it's going to take a lot of years to get a decent amount of evidence. So when you look at something that looks promising, it's kind of a gut feel to some degree. And if there's kind of the purist scientists out there that they're like, look, if the data's not there, it's a no. It's a hard no. Whereas there's the people like myself who look at things with a slightly more open mind and go, right, even though we don't know it's categoric. And I remember I was at a seminar with a chap called Jose Antonio, who was one of the senior guys, the ISSN, the International Society of Sports Nutrition. And I remember the seminar he presented, and somebody asked him about a certain ingredient. And he said, look, he goes, ultimately, if we don't have the data, he goes, if it's something that you can do, you can take in this situation, he goes, if you can take it, you can afford it, and it has no detrimental effects that we know of, and it has a positive effect. He said, just take it, and then when the evidence comes, we can decide whether we carry on taking it. So his thing was, look, if it's not going to cause any detriment, give it a go, and we'll see where it goes. And this is the thing with a lot of stuff, especially when it comes to nutrition. There's a lot of stuff emerging. So I think if you wait for body of evidence, you miss the boat because you've got an opportunity to innovate. And if you don't follow that, you then put yourself in a corner. So there's always got to be that element, Tom, of somebody being willing to put their hand up and go, I was wrong. And this is a thing. And I think what happens is people wedge themselves into such a corner that they can't turn around and change their mind. And I think you see this with, again, we'll talk facilities, because again, I know it's a topic very close to the heart, but when we talk about facilities, what they'll do is they'll get a bit of piece of equipment in. And then because the gym owners made that decision to bring that equipment, they'll never retract that. They'll never go, nobody's using it. So they just leave it there gathering dust or whatever it might be, because at some point they believed in it. Instead of going, well, actually, no, it was a trend. That's all it was. It was fad. We got pulled into it. Instead of going, it was an innovation that we gave a go.
Yeah.
Different, right? When you feel you've been pulled into a fad, I think it's a very different mentality to if you've gone, look, this looks good right now. We don't know whether it's going to stand the test of time or the evidence or the data. So therefore, we'll give it a go. And if that data doesn't stack up, we'll remove it. And I think there's that. You've got to have that mentality. So there's that element. So you've either got to wait for it or you've got to innovate and follow it. Because again, we're just looking at lines here, right? Look, where's the trend going? Is it going up? And we've seen it where there's been trends where stuff's got through the roof, and then all of a sudden it's like, oh. But now what we've done is we've done a really comprehensive study and found out that it doesn't do it. When I was at university, we studied a compound called hydroxymethylbutyrate, HMB, which at the time was touted as the new creative. It was like the thing. And you don't even see it now. And it had emerging data for it for probably the best part. Well, my entire time I was at university. So 3 to 5 years, it looked really promising and everybody was using it. Every sports nutrition brand was selling it. And then it just disappeared. And you've seen this throughout the whole sort of sports nutrition world over the years. Things come and go. Very few things stay. So there's that. What was the other one?
The other one was not using it like your support network around you and trying to do everything yourself.
Hey, look, I'm a massive fan in networking. I think, the people, if I look at every single opportunity that I've ever had in life or every single step we've stepped up as a business, it's all been facilitated by a person. And if I don't utilize that network and those people, I would, again, on my journey up here, which, is circa a couple of hours, I probably connected with, I think, probably about 30 new people on this tip. And every single person that I connected with, I sent a message to and explained why I was pleased to be connected with, which is kind of the icebreaker to some degree. And off the back of that, I would expect something to come in business out of one of those connections. And now we'll do that daily. I'll connect with new people daily. I'll explain to them what we do. I'll explain to them how, the synergy between what we do and just tell them I'm pleased to be connected, which I genuinely am. So I think to not capitalize on your networks or your surroundings or the people around you, I think is crazy.
Yeah.
And I've never seen anyone really succeed in business being, almost that single-minded, introverted sort of, I'm going to do all this on my own.
Yeah.
And one of my biggest regrets in business is that I didn't reach out to those networks early with some of my earlier businesses where I was like, look, I tried to do it all myself. And, I'm a northern, I was brought up to go, you do everything yourself and you get on with it yourself and then there's nobody else to blame and there's nobody else to, whereas now I'm like, look, it's about network and it's a bit like employing new members of staff. You have to, if you do due diligence and ask the right questions, you'll get the right person.
Yeah.
If you don't do your due diligence and you don't do the groundwork, you won't get the right person. And ultimately the consequence lies with you. So yeah, I think that tricky to decipher which is the bad one, which is the
I think it's very cliche, but it is true. It's like your network is your net worth.
Yeah.
And
isn't it, Fres?
And I think, have you not heard that before?
No,
I was going to say, yeah, it's not.
I've heard it. Well,
I think it's so true, and if you're not sort of using the people around you, like I'm sure you, as you say, you didn't get to where you are today without using other people, and then now what that I mean, you can correct me if I'm wrong, gives you is the ability to actually, if you only have to send 30 messages now, whereas before you probably had to send 200, let's say, and now probably more people are inclined to interact with you.
I think what it is, Tom, I think there's this whole thing, and I think this is what people have failed to recognize, is that social media once upon a time, and go back to, I can go back to when I was at school, there's no social media, right? Is that as it was this thing of accumulate friends. Yeah. It was like you just had to create this network of friends. Then as you get older, you realize that a lot of them aren't friends, they're just colleagues.
Yeah.
And then as you get older, you siphon that right down. And the problem we have is that we have this world of social media. This world of social media is about accumulating numbers instead of making connections. And when you say about, that phrase, that net worth and network, people seem to think that it's just a matter of numbers. Is that stockpile as many damn people in your network as possible. I'm like, look, no, you have to connect with the right people. You have to connect with them for a rational reason, and you have to talk to them.
Yeah,
because if you don't create a connection, it's kind of pointless. It's like going out on a night out and chatting to someone all evening and then not actually knowing their name or having the phone number that you contact them.
Yeah,
I was chatting to this person, right, and they were in my industry and it was really interesting and we talked about this, that, the other, and then we left. And that was it. But that's what people do on social media or even like LinkedIn.
Yeah.
They just connect with people and they never say anything. So anybody that I connect with on LinkedIn, I go out my way to contact them, to say hello, and not just this generic, a lot of people automate this, right? So yes, yeah. Oh, pleasure to be connected. I appreciate you, because obviously in LinkedIn it's slightly different. You don't just follow somebody.
Yeah.
It's, this is actually connecting with people. So I think it's connections, right? It's not how big that network is. It's what's it called?
Yeah, no, but 100%. I think in my old sales job, I used to, like, LinkedIn was obviously a massive part of that.
Yeah.
And like you connect with someone and you'd be like, yeah, job done. And then actually, as you realize, like, you actually start to have more success when you are, being personable, putting quality kind of reach out, personalizing everything. Like that's what people appreciate it as well. And like remembering people's names even is just simple.
This is client acquisition. This is member acquisition.
Yeah.
This is like 101.
Yeah.
This is like everything. If you want to, if you're a facility owner and you know the name of everybody that walks through that door, they'll stay. There's a high percentage that they will stay.
Yeah.
And like I said, this is 101. This is really basic, simple stuff.
And I actually find as well, even if they go and leave, they normally come back because the other, competition facility probably isn't putting that effort in. And even if you're the most introverted person, it's nice to know that actually, like, these people are looking out for me.
Yeah.
And maybe it's just because you know their name, but like it does kind of breathe that like nice.
Oh, you shake someone by the hand and say hello to them and you remember their name, and it's not always possible, but ultimately, you've got, again, well, I don't know whether you've navigated this really cleverly, but if we talk about like membership systems, right, is that and I've told this story a million times over about acquisition of clients, right?
Yeah.
Is that I moved to a facility in London. Nobody knew me. Nobody knew my background. Nobody knew my pedigree, my qualifications, any of that. And I acquired a waiting list of clients within 3 weeks of being there. And then people are like, well, how did you do that? I walked in. They had a membership system where people swiped the card and their name popped up.
Yeah.
I remembered the name, went on the gym floor, introduced myself, called them by the name, and within 3 weeks, I've got a waiting list of clients. And every single trainer in there hated me for it. And they're like, I don't understand what's happened here. Have you given a backhand to the membership sales team or whatever it might be? I said, no, I just went around, I introduced myself. And the problem is that these are people that have been in that gym and members of that gym for a long period of time and never ever been approached by a coach who wasn't just trying to sell their services.
Yeah.
They didn't just get introduced to somebody. And this is, again, comms, communication, building connections with people. And this goes back to everything. If you wanted to talk about business to anybody, and I guarantee if you get 10 people who talk about business and how do you scale a business, how do you build, it's connections, it's human connections. It's how do we do this? How do we do it effectively? And ultimately, everything we talk about all points back to that same thing: community, connections, people. So yeah. So I don't know where I stand with two. I don't know which one to do.
I think, to be honest, not communicating, not sharing the workload is probably not more detrimental to your success, but it slows the rate of success.
I think you probably. I'm with you on that, Tom.
Whereas, the hopping on every trend is it's just maybe a bit of a waste of time.
It's just a bit of a waste of time. Whereas the other one is hugely detrimental.
Yeah.
The other one, you waste a bit of time, you waste a bit of money. Ultimately,
you probably take.
If you're okay with putting your hand up and going, look, I was wrong.
Yeah.
You're fine.
I think it's easily solvable as well. If you actually just, living in the moment and put yourself in the moment, actually thinking, is this working? And constantly asking yourself those questions, it's solvable. Whereas, not sharing the workload, again, is solvable, but you've also got it's more effort to, be personable. And
I think the trends thing as well, there's that social media aspect to the trends thing where as an individual in the industry, I think you're expected to either jump on board or condemn it.
Yeah.
I think you're told that you have to do one or the other. So you have to go on social media, you either have to ridicule it, pull it apart, or you have to, whereas I think the good coaches, they're not ridiculing it, they're not pulling it apart, they're sitting subjectively in the middle going, and I always used to use the explanation. I said, look, what we have in our industry, we've always had this, and it still exists to this day, is that we've got people throwing stones at each other. And, you're throwing stones at me, I'm throwing stones at you because we have different opinions. It's human nature in it. As then in the middle, what you've got all the great coaches sat in the middle. You can pull the stones and doing something with them. And that's the way I've always explained it. I said, look, and all the great coaches reside in the middle because the great coach is going, look, I'm interested in what you've got to say, Tom, and Phil, I'm interested in what you've got to say. What I'm then going to do, I'm going to interpret it. I'm going to look at the evidence, I'm going to look at the data, I'm going to look at everything that we do, and I'm going to use some common sense, overarching all of that. But I'm not going to sit on the offense, and I'm not going to sit on the offense. What I'm going to do, I'm going to sit right in the middle.
Yeah, I mean, things already have the black and white, aren't they? I'll count myself lucky there's no stones around here as well. So just moving into sort of the actual podcast itself, I guess. Have we not started? No, this is all B-roll. If you could kind of just give us, a really, before we get into kind of the meat of podcast, if you could give us just a little breakdown of what, young Phil, where he was, why he got started, maybe what you were doing at university, and then kind of how that's progressed and, where you're at now, I guess. I know you explained that a little bit, so maybe actually just the early life.
So young Phil, massively sporty, grew up in a pub in the Lake District, had a horrendous diet. My idea of snacking was grabbing something from the bar, which was normally crisps or chocolate. Grabbing a drink was normally a glass underneath the Coke dispenser because it was accessible to me. My parents didn't know any different because they'd never been taught anything about food or nutrition or whatever it might be. And obviously I enjoyed those things, so they let me do it. And obviously gained a load of weight. I was a big overweight kid. I was at the time the most overweight kid at school, which again, to my detriment, it created challenges. And now the scary thing is now I would probably be average. I think I'd sit in now. I mean, the statistics around obesity are insane. And ultimately got into exercise because, well, I was always into sport. So I did a lot of sport, had knee problems and hip problems. Because again, I was carrying around a lot of weight, and fortunately for me, a lot of the sports I did were on grass, which I think would have caused me even more problems. And then got into the gym. We had a gym opened in the local town that I was able to go to, and I started gymming when I was about 14. So I'd stay on after school. I'd go to the gym after school, and then I had a chap in our local village who used to give me a lift home after he finished work, and that was me. I got into the gym. It was life-changing, like categorically life-changing. And that wasn't just weight loss. That was everything it did for me. Yeah, confidence. It was, a belief in myself. It was being able to take, plan from point A to point B, and it was this thing about I want to get stronger, and therefore I got stronger. I'm like, I can do this. And it was that self-belief thing. So for me, it was life-changing. And then when I got into the latter years of school, it was this whole thing of, between the age of 16 and 18, you got to decide what you want to do for your
Yes, you did go to my university, yeah.
And it was this thing of what do you do? And I was good at two things. I was very creative. I was good at art and design, and so I looked at that as an option. My uncle was a product designer, and I did some work placements. Hated it because I was of that era where, and again, I'm going to sound really old here, but they didn't use computers for this stuff. It was all pen and paper, and it was drawings and technical drawings. And then it was in that point where we're transitioning to computers. So I went to this work experience at these 3 different places, one for interior design, one for product design, one for graphic design. And they all stuck me on computers. And I hated it because I didn't have a clue how to use them.
Yeah.
So it was their first era Macs where they had the big giant Dayglow backs on them. They were about this deep. And I didn't have a clue what to do. And then I remember the interior one, they actually put me back onto a piece of card, and I had to do these creative sort of landscapes. And then I was like, well, that ruled out. So I was like, what's the other thing I'm decent at? Sport. And I thought, well, I'm all right at sport. I played decent level cricket and rugby. But it was the sort of thing where I was like, I don't think I'm good enough to make a living out of this. So I repointed things towards sports science. I did next year at school to do A-level PE. They started doing A-level PE in our school at upper 6th. So there was 8 of us stayed on for next year at school because it meant I didn't have to go and do an HNDT on a degree course. So there's 8 of us.
No one knew what HND is.
Well, it was the access to get onto a BSc or a BA at the time, and so it would have meant I had to go to college, from college to do an HND to then go to university. And I was like, well, I could just stay on in school. So I did A-level PE, which gave me enough with respect to a science to get on the BSc course. So then went to university, did sport and exercise science, came out of it with a load of what I always state as paper knowledge. I didn't understand how to dot the I's and cross the T's. I had a lot of knowledge around science and data or blah, 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 but never really knew how to then apply it. And that was kind of what brought me into developing the academy later on after that. And yeah, that was where my passion lies. So it was all about, and I know, again, it's cliche, but I got into the industry to help people because what it did for me as an individual was unbelievable. I was in a bad state when I first started going to the gym, and mentally there was challenges and there was all sorts of stuff that later on in life it all came to the surface, and it was all very evident what it was. But it was it was a problematic time for me, and then that literally changed the trajectory of my entire life. And for me to be able to then give that to other people, I'm like, this is life changing. And this was just me training, having a bit of direction, losing that weight, feeling better about myself, getting stronger. So there's all of these elements, and I'm like, what if I could give that to other people? And again, like I say, very cliche, but that's what I got into the industry for. And for me, it's always been about that. And again, every development of every business, what we do at Human 24 was all about, look, what big problems do human beings have? And it was about solving those problems. And that's always been my key driver, is that can we look at a big problem that a lot of people suffer from, and can we find a solution to it? So, yeah.
Yeah, no, and it's kind of, I don't want to say a trap because it's not a trap. It's actually a really nice thing, but it's people get into the industry because of a passion that they have for the industry. Like, I don't think there's anyone that, decides I'm going to own a gym because it's going to make them loads of money.
Yeah.
And that's purely the reason. And then I guess people can also kind of fall into the trap of, because they're so passionate about it, they don't really think outside of just having a gym. And then there's the marketing. So being a business owner yourself, in the fitness industry, what would you say are is the bridge between, how can you find the bridge between, passion and actually success, and how can you kind
I
of
think it's deciphering what's, we hear the term passion project, right? Is that a lot of people get into being coaches because they enjoy the gym, and that isn't deep enough.
Yeah.
Because just because you enjoy something, but what happens, and I think that there's that societal pressure on somebody at the age of 16 to probably 20, where you're told you've got to make a decision as to what you're going to do for the rest of your life, which I think is a lot of pressure. And what happens in that grey area, and we know this, and I know this statistically, because again, who we get signed up to the courses and blah, 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 is that you get these people who, I enjoy going to the gym. I remember back in my day, there wasn't many people who went to the gym.
Yeah.
I enjoy sport was the thing, right? So now it's, I enjoy the gym, so therefore I'm a bit stumped as to what I'm going to do for the rest of my life. I know it's really easy to get into the fitness industry because the entry point, the level 3 is terrible. And then, I was at an event just the other week at one of the big facilities in London, and I actually asked the question and I said, how many of you are level 3? Literally everybody put their hands up. I said, let's have a little competition as to who did it in the shortest time. And there was a chap, put his hand up, he goes, 3 months. He goes, I qualified fully in 3 months. And he was the shortest one. And there's shorter variants than that. So it's accessible, it's relatively cheap. People qualify and get into it, and then realize that that passion was really just about their own training.
Yeah.
And the problem is you can't build a business around that. It's like gyms, right? Not so much nowadays, I don't think. But gyms were built by people who've been encouraged by their friends to open a gym because they thought, I like the thought of owning the gym. It's like people who own bars.
Yeah.
They like the thought of owning a bar, but the actual running and operating of it is tough. It's hard to make and I, doff my cap to anybody who makes a gym successful, because it's a hard business. But ultimately, it's about planning, it's about procedures, it's about structure, it's about all those things. The amount of people that ask me, why have you never opened a gym, Phil? And I'm like, because I've done the maths on it. And I said, I'm not prepared to work on so much stuff that I just don't enjoy to make something work that ultimately I'm not probably going to make that much money from. If I spread it out and start to make a chain and, blah, 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 yeah, totally. But I don't want to do that. So therefore, it becomes a passion project, and it becomes something that I want to have a bit of a flex with my friends and go, yeah, that's my gym. I'm completely bankrupt, but that's my gym. Yeah. So I think it's always this thing of, you've got to decipher what's something you just enjoy versus what's something where you have a genuine desire to help people get from here to B. And if you want to open a gym just to, crank through, just make money, ultimately there's probably better choices to do it. But ultimately, if you've got a passion for it, a genuine, deep down passion to help the people that walk through your doors, we go back on what we were talking about before, is that you will make the effort to make those connections.
Yeah.
Which means you create the community, which create the network, which will then make it a profitable business. So ultimately, it all goes kind of full circle, I guess. So in a roundabout way, it's this thing of knowing the difference between what's something you enjoy and what's something that you should take as a career and something that's going to be constantly driven by your passion to help people.
Yeah. I mean, I agree with everything you've said, and this is going to make it sound like I don't, but I think, is there an element, do you think, and I kind of do think that, but is there an element of you can employ people to do maybe the bits of the business that you don't like? So maybe there is that personable side that maybe you yourself as the gym owner don't have to do, but as long as someone is doing it, then that's fine.
But that's a numbers game, though. That's still a numbers game, because if you don't do your due diligence, it's all well and good going, look, I'm going to employ someone to do the stuff I don't enjoy, but if you're not making any money, you're not employing anybody.
Yes.
So ultimately, it's still got to be that key driver at the base and foundation of that whole thing. Because if you're going to be, look, if I'm the one who's passionate about the gym and I'm going to be the front-facing person who's going to introduce myself to everybody and say hello, blah, 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 and there's all this stuff that I don't enjoy doing, I'm going to have to do all that in the early stages anyway.
Yeah.
Right. So when I employ people to do those, it's all well and good that I'm employing them. But now what I've got a series of further overheads that I've then got to facilitate with everything else that I'm doing. So it's a great logistical, solution, but it's, and I get this, and I hear this with like business mentors who work with coaches. They're like, you need to employ someone. And they're like, well, I don't have enough money. I don't make enough money to employ someone. So then what do? You've got to do the bits that you don't enjoy.
Yeah.
It's like startup mentality. And if you're not prepared to do that, you've got to fail. So the employment thing and putting someone in to do the stuff you don't enjoy is all well and good. But if you haven't got the resources and the foundations to do that, which is normally the case, it's just a pipe dream.
Yeah.
It's this thing of, you can't get anyone to do that. I treat, my two business very differently because they're a different level of maturity as a business. So one, we have the resources to employ people and do all those different things that we want. If there's something that's, we need done, and, it's not a matter of me rolling my sleeves up and getting it done. It's a matter of I'll get someone to come in and do that for me.
Yeah.
Whereas if you haven't got the resources, you've got to do it yourself.
Yeah.
It's a bit like, do you get an electrician in to come and change your light bulbs, or do you do it yourself? If you've got the skill, you do it yourself, because it's kind of a pointless exercise. But then, and again, light bulbs are a good example. I've got 12 bulbs in my office, and I just had them replaced with some biocentric bulbs. And I was chatting to the chap who sells them. He says, "Oh, you can do them yourself." I said, "Yeah, but," I said, "how long is it going to take me to do 12 of them?" I said, "Really, the amount of money it's going to cost me to get someone to come in and do that, he's going to do it in half the time. He's going to do it far more efficiently than I am, and it means that I can get on with my work." I said, so it's worth the investment. Whereas he's looking at it from almost a startup mentality. Yeah, I'm looking at it from a business development perspective. And again, you've got to have the resources. So yeah, I agree with it. You can get people in to do these things, but it ultimately still falls back on, if your business isn't successful, you haven't got the resources to do that. So you've got to have that startup mentality.
Yeah. And I guess building on that as well, something that you sort of talk about a lot, and I've seen you talk about it, is that like avoiding burnout and operating at your kind of highest level. And yeah, so putting yourself in the shoes of someone in that kind of startup mentality, having to put the graft in. I think we've already touched on the kind of like, you just have to do the work anyway, so there's no point complaining and not doing it. So let's say someone's got past that now and they're doing all the work, but they're like burning out. And I think even building on that, as well, you have a very kind of objective approach to people's health, and it's like internal biology is also one of the main things that people need to work. So why do you? This is a bit of a two-parter. Why do you have that approach of the internal biology as the biggest thing to your success as a gym owner? And I guess, is there anything else outside of that maybe is as important that people can look to improve as well?
I'm a data and numbers guy. Look, there's always outliers. I was chatting to somebody the other day, and you look at the statistics around sleep, it's obscene. Like the impact on mental health, cognitive output, physical output, productivity. You look at it across the board, it's unanimous. You cannot compromise sleep. But then people are pointing back to Margaret Thatcher, Winston Churchill, all these people who notoriously did what they did on very little sleep.
Yeah.
But the question will always be here, how long did they do it for on very little sleep? And also, what did they leave on the table potentially? How many decisions did they make that were bad because of a lack of sleep?
Yeah.
And there's all of these things in here. And again, some of it's just anecdote. We don't know for sure that they didn't do this, but the human being is an incredibly resourceful, mechanism, in that we're able to do these things for very short periods of time. So very short period of time is subjective. What do we mean by that? So, we have this same dilemma with athletes. So when we're dealing with athletes, we look at the sport. So if I consider a fighter might have between 4 and 6 bouts a year, maybe even less. Now, am I prepared to compromise biology for each of those bouts? Yeah, I am. I don't care. I don't care if the night after a world championship fight, they don't get much sleep. Don't care. Yeah, doesn't matter, because we can reset our corrector. It's minor. It's might cause some major biological upset for a short period of time, but ultimately, in the grand scheme of things, it's about peaking for a particular performance. Now, somebody doing that chronically every single week, somebody doing that 5 days a week at work, isn't good.
Yes.
because that's when we talk about burnout, and that's when we talk about the physical implications of somebody doing this on a chronic level, and that's when it becomes an issue. And this is, we look at habits and behaviors, and we look at things that you do as a business, and it's the things you continuously do that cause problems. And this is the same with health. It's the things you continuously do, not the things you sporadically do. If you go out and eat a ton of junk food on, once every month, I think you're going to be all right. If you go out and have a bunch of alcohol, you're going to be all right. But when you chronically do it and you repeatedly do it, that's when it causes a problem. So when we talk about human biology, we always talk about sleep-wake targets. I was actually writing about it this morning on the journey up. And I said, the reason that we set targets, because if you look at data, you look at all the research that's ever been done on habits, behaviors, targets, setting targets, strategy, blah, blah, blah. If you don't plan for something, you inevitably probably will fail, right? So we've got to set out a process of things that you've got to do to get to the end point. We know this. It's like a map, right? So if we don't plan a journey and you just start driving and you kind of think, I'll go left or I'll go right, and this is life, right? So if we don't strategically put a plan in, and the remarkable thing about sleep is nobody has a plan. You ask anybody what they consistently do. Most people consistently wake up, and the only reason they consistently wake up is because of work.
Yeah.
So when it comes to the days they don't have work, they don't get up at the same time. So then they disrupt their internal biology. Now, and again, without getting into too much here, but it's what we call social jet lag. Now, when you create social jet lag, for every hour that you shift your biology by, it's going to take you 24 hours for your body to reacclimatize and go back to where it was before. That's detrimental. So if you go out on a weekend, Friday, Saturday night, and mess with that biology, the detriment that you will have cognitively and physically over the next 4 days of your next week is huge.
Yeah.
And we know this, so it's what do we set targets for? So we set targets for waking up just because we've got an alarm clock, but we don't set targets when we go to bed. So one of the first things we do is we start setting targets. And if you go to any business consultant, you can pay a ton of money for somebody to come in, and business consultant, you pay for those staff that we talked about. So I don't like cleaning the gym. Now, if you don't put a procedure in for cleaning the gym, what does somebody do? Just walk around and randomly wipe dust off stuff or wipe stuff? You've got to have a procedure, right?
Yeah.
You've got to make a list of things that have to be done in a strategic way. Otherwise, what happens is it doesn't work. But we go at life with this lack of plan. People fly to different, a lot of stuff we do in elite sport is to do with planning for journeys. You're going to fly to a different continent. It's on a different time zone biologically. It's the one you're on. What's the plan? Is there a plan? Or do you just get there and go, I feel terrible? You just feel terrible for 4 days. Why don't we just accumulate a plan to, move our biology before we get there? Then when you land, you're like, I feel great.
Yeah.
Because for a lot of people, that's a holiday.
That was the end of part 1 of our chat with Phil Learney. I hope you enjoyed it. And if you did, and you look forward to the next episode, that will be out at the end of the month, or June 2025, if you're watching this way in the future. If you enjoyed that and you can't wait till then check out our other episodes on all platforms where you can get podcasts, and check out our socials for tips, tricks, and insights on the latest news from the industry. See you in the next episode.